Title: Wait Till I Get Free. By Kayode Ike, Saturday, May 18, 2025. Chapter 1. A Fresh Start. The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the faint, sweet perfume of blossoming roses in Sandra's hands. Sunlight, dappled and warm, streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, forgotten wishes. Peter, 28, leaned against the doorframe, a lopsided grin on his face as he watched Sandra, 27, arrange a vase of flowers on their new dining table. Perfect, he said, his voice a low rumble that always sent a shiver of contentment down her spine. Just like everything else. Sandra turned, her smile radiant. It's starting to feel real, isn't it? Their new home, a charming two-story nestled in what looked like the quintessential suburban dream, was more than just bricks and mortar. It was the foundation of their future. After years of shared dreams and whispered plans, Peter and Sandra were finally settling down. The engagement ring on Sandra's finger glinted, a promise of the wedding they were meticulous planning for next spring. They'd moved into the neighborhood just 3 weeks ago, full of the optimistic energy that comes with a fresh start, ready to paint their lives onto this new canvas. They imagined quiet evenings on the porch, weekend barbecues with new friends, and the gentle rhythm of suburban life. Their street, lined with neatly trimmed hedges and blooming flowerbeds, seemed to whisper assurances of peace and tranquility. They saw themselves growing old here, raising a family, etching their history into the very walls of this house. But sometimes, the most beautiful canvases hide the darkest secrets. And sometimes, the quiet hum of suburban life can be a prelude to a storm. Chapter 2. The Neighbors Next Door. It didn't take long for the quiet hum to become a discordant note. The house next door, a slightly more ramshackle affair than their own, was home to Sean, 31, and Raymond, 28. From the moment Peter and Sandra started unpacking, a strange tension emanated from their neighbors. It wasn't just the loud music that thumped through the shared wall at odd hours, or the constant stream of unsavory-looking characters pulling up to their driveway at all times of the night. It was the glares, the muttered comments, the palpable sense of animosity that seemed to cling to Sean and Raymond like a second skin. Peter, ever the optimist, had tried to wave it off. They're just neighborhood characters, love. Maybe they're not used to new people. Sandra, however, felt a prickle of unease that refused to be so easily dismissed. Sean, with his gaunt face and restless eyes, often seemed agitated, his movements jerky and unpredictable. Raymond, leaner and quieter, had a calculating look in his eyes that made Sandra shiver. One evening, Peter had been attempting to fix a leaky faucet while Sandra was out grocery shopping. He'd heard a commotion from next door, raised voices, a sudden smash, followed by a chilling, triumphant laugh from Sean. Peter had tried to ignore it, focusing on the drip, drip, drip of the faucet, but the sound had lingered, an unsettling echo in the quiet evening. They also noticed the subtle, yet undeniable, signs of illicit activity. The distinct smell of weed often wafted over their fence. The brief, hushed transactions that took place in the shadows of Sean and Raymond's porch, the quick exchange of small packages for wads of cash. It was all there, thinly veiled, a dark undercurrent to their otherwise idyllic new life. Peter and Sandra, caught up in the excitement of their wedding plans and decorating their home, tried to turn a blind eye. They were new here, they told themselves. Best not to get involved. Best to just settle in and hope the problem would resolve itself. They were wrong. Chapter 3. The Spark. The morning air was crisp and cool, a perfect antidote to the lingering anxieties about their neighbors. Sandra decided to embrace the tranquility. She brewed herself a steaming mug of Earl Grey and stepped out into her burgeoning front garden. She was meticulously tending to a new bed of impatiens, her fingers stained with rich earth, when the peace shattered. A guttural roar tore through the quiet. Oi, you. Sandra straightened up slowly, her heart seizing. Sean, from next door, was stumbling across his lawn, his eyes bloodshot and dilated, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. He was clearly high, a chillingly aggressive energy radiating from him. What do you think you're doing? Prancing around like you own the place, huh? Sean slurred, his voice laced with venom. He staggered to their shared fence line, gripping the wooden slats with white-knuckled intensity. You and your fancy pants fiancé. Think you're better than everyone, don't you? Sandra stiffened. Excuse me. I'm just gardening, Sean. What's your problem? My problem. He let out a harsh, derisive laugh. My problem is you. You're clogging up the neighborhood. Making it all sterile. Don't like it. Don't like you or your pretty little face. His eyes raked over her, a disgusting leer that made her skin crawl. You're trash. You hear me? Just like all the others who come poking their noses where they don't belong. A cold fury began to burn within Sandra, pushing past her initial fear. You have no right to talk to me like that. Get off my property. Oh. I have every right. He roared, spittle flying from his lips. This whole street is mine. And you're a stuck-up bitch who needs to learn her place. You annoy me, and if you keep annoying me, you're gonna regret it. I'll make sure you regret it. He punctuated his threat with a lewd gesture that made Sandra gasp. Fear and outrage warred within her. She stood her ground, trembling but resolute. Get out. Get away from my house. Sean just laughed, a chilling, triumphant sound that echoed in the quiet street. He lingered for a moment, his eyes filled with a disturbing malevolence, before finally turning and stumbling back towards his own house, leaving Sandra shaking, her hands clenched into fists, the pleasant morning ruined. Chapter 4. The Threat. The moment Peter's car pulled into the driveway that evening, Sandra burst into tears. She was sitting on the porch swing, attempting to compose herself, but the memory of Sean's venomous words and terrifying eyes was still too fresh, too raw. Peter, seeing her distraught face, was at her side in an instant. His brow furrowed with concern. Sandra. What happened? What's wrong? He knelt before her, gently wiping a tear from her cheek. Through choked sobs, she recounted the incident, her voice trembling with lingering fear and outrage. It was him, Peter. That stupid next-door neighbor, Sean. He came over, high as a kite, and just started shouting at me. He insulted me, Peter. He threatened me. He was so vile. Peter's jaw tightened. A vein throbbed in his temple. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close until her trembling subsided. The protective instinct, fierce and primal, surged within him. No one, absolutely no one, was going to make his Sandra cry. Stay here, he said, his voice low and dangerous, a stark contrast to his usual calm demeanor. I'm going to have a word with him. Sandra grabbed his arm. Peter. No, don't. He's dangerous. He was high. Just leave it. But Peter was already striding towards the fence, his determination unwavering. He pounded on Sean's front door. After a long moment, it creaked open, revealing Sean, looking marginally less erratic but still with a defiant glint in his eye. What do you want? Sean sneered. Peter's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. I want to know why you thought it was acceptable to harass my fiancée this morning. She was just in her garden, minding her own business, and you abused her. That's not going to happen again. Sean snorted, feigning innocence. What are you talking about? I don't know what you're on about. Your missus is probably making things up. She's a drama queen, isn't she? Don't you dare, Peter warned, taking a step closer. I saw her. She was terrified. You threatened her. Sean's expression hardened. His eyes narrowed, suddenly cold and calculating, devoid of the earlier drug-induced haze. I didn't do anything. And if you think you're going to come over here and tell me what to do, you've got another thing coming. You wait, boy. You just wait and see what I do next. He delivered the words with a chillingly calm menace, a stark contrast to his earlier wildness. Then, without another word, he slammed the door shut. Peter stood there for a moment, the ominous words hanging in the air. He felt a shiver despite himself, a prickle of genuine fear. He walked back to Sandra, who was now standing by her front door, watching him with wide, anxious eyes. He denied everything, Peter stated, his voice tight. And then he threatened me. Said I should wait and see what he does next. Sandra's face paled further. He's sick, Peter. We need to be careful. Peter nodded, pulling her close. The initial surge of anger was replaced by ignoring worry. He tried to brush off Sean's threat, telling himself it was just the empty bluster of a petty criminal. But an uneasy feeling settled deep in his gut, a premonition that the peaceful new life was about to be irrevocably shattered. Chapter 5. Unseen Enemies. Peter tried to put Sean's words out of his mind. "You wait and see what I do next." It sounded like empty bravado, the desperate rant of a man strung out on drugs. He couldn't fathom why Sean harbored such intense dislike for him and Sandra. They were quiet, kept to themselves, and hadn't done anything to provoke him. Perhaps, Peter mused, it was simply their presence, new, settled, successful, that grated on Sean's already frayed nerves. Ignorance, Peter decided, was the best defense. He focused on his work, on wedding preparations, on building a life with Sandra. He tried to convince himself that Sean was all bark, no bite. But next door, in the dimly lit living room of the cluttered house, Sean and Raymond were hatching a plan, a venomous seed of an idea that promised to tear Peter and Sandra's carefully constructed world apart. Sean paced, agitated, running a hand through his greasy hair. "There's a problem, Ray. A big problem. Ever since they moved in, I've had to be careful. Too many eyes. Too clean. It's making things difficult." Raymond, ever the more pragmatic and cold-blooded of the two, leaned back in his worn armchair, a cigarette smoldering between his fingers. "The getting in the way, then." "Exactly." Sean slammed a fist onto a nearby table, rattling a stack of grimy magazines. "And I don't have anywhere to stash new product. The usual spots are drying up. The heat's on, you know. Cops are sniffing around." He gestured wildly towards the window, pointing in the direction of Peter and Sandra's house. "The new lot, the too damn observant. Always looking." Raymond took a slow drag from his cigarette, exhaling a plume of smoke that hung heavy in the stale air. A slow, chilling smile spread across his face, revealing a missing tooth. "You want them out of the neighborhood, eh?" Sean stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "More than anything. They're a blight. And they're bad for business." Raymond's smile widened, a calculating glint in his eye. "Well, I might just have an idea for both those problems." Chapter 6. The Setup. The air in Sean and Raymond's living room crackled with an insidious energy as Raymond laid out his plan. "Think about it, Sean. They're new. They're clean. Everyone on the street thinks they're little angels." Sean grunted, impatience etched on his face. "Get to the point, Ray." Raymond leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You said you need somewhere to hide the drugs, right? Somewhere safe, unexpected, where no one would ever look." Sean nodded slowly, intrigued despite himself. "The garden, Sean," Raymond said, a triumphant gleam in his eyes. "Peter and Sandra's garden. It's perfect." Sean stared, then a slow, wicked grin spread across his face. "The garden. Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Raymond confirmed. "It's got plenty of space. And who would suspect them? We stash a decent amount there. Not too much to be obviously ours, but enough to make it look like the dealing." Sean let out a low chuckle, a dark, unsettling sound. "And then what? They find it and give it back?" No, Raymond scoffed. "This is the clever part. Once the drugs are buried nice and deep, tucked away where even they won't find it, I make a phone call. A phone call. To the authorities," Raymond explained, leaning back, satisfied with the masterstroke. "I'll be the concerned citizen. An anonymous tip, of course. Say I've noticed suspicious activity next door. Late nights, strange comings and goings. And then, I mention that I have reason to believe they're involved in drugs, and that I even know where they keep it." Sean's eyes lit up. "You tell them exactly where to dig." "Precisely," Raymond confirmed, a smug look on his face. "They'll go straight to Peter's garden, dig it up, find the drugs, and there you have it. Peter and Sandra, caught red-handed. They'll be too busy explaining themselves to worry about us setting up shop again. And they won't be living next door anymore, that's for sure." Sean's grin stretched wider, a truly evil expression. "That's brilliant, Ray. Absolutely brilliant. They'll never see it coming." Raymond just nodded, exhaling another slow cloud of smoke. He was happy. This plan solved all their problems, a secure hiding spot, removal of the annoying neighbors, and a clear path for the drug operations to flourish undisturbed. He pictured Peter and Sandra's faces as the police tore the perfect garden apart. It was a beautiful thought. Chapter 7. The Invasion. The following Tuesday began like any other ordinary day. Peter was preparing for work, Sandra was watering her nascent herb garden, the sun shining innocently. Then, the piercing wail of sirens shattered the morning's peace. Red and blue lights flashed, painting an ominous dance on the walls of their living room. Peter and Sandra rushed to the window, their faces etched with confusion. 2 police cruisers, an unmarked car, and a large white van were pulling up to their curb. Uniformed officers spilled out, their expressions grim and purposeful. "What on earth?" Sandra whispered, pressing a hand to her mouth. Before they could fully process the scene, a thunderous knock echoed through their house. Peter opened the door cautiously, his heart pounding. 2 stern-faced officers stood on their porch, badges glinting in the morning light. "Peter Davies," the lead officer, Sergeant Miller, asked, his voice clipped and devoid of warmth. "Yes, that's me," Peter replied, a knot forming in his stomach. "What's going on, officer?" "We have a warrant to search your property, Mr. Davies," Miller stated, presenting a folded document. "We've received an anonymous tip concerning illegal substances being stored on these premises." Sandra gasped, stepping forward. "Illegal substances? That's impossible. We don't have anything like that here." "Ma'am, please step aside," another officer instructed. Before they could protest further, more officers, some with K9 units, began to spread out, systematically moving through the garden. The K9 handler led a sniffer dog directly to a patch of freshly turned earth near Peter's beloved rose bushes. The dog barked excitedly, pawing at the ground. Sergeant Miller pointed. "Dig here." Peter and Sandra watched in horror as a uniformed officer began to shovel, tearing into the soft soil. Each scoop felt like a violation of their home, their sanctuary. Disbelief warred with a rising panic. This had to be a mistake. But then, the shovel struck something hard. The officer knelt, brushing away the dirt. A gasp escaped Peter's lips as a black, waterproof package was unearthed, followed by another, and another. Ziploc bags filled with white powder and compressed green matter were revealed, neatly packed within the waterproof casings. The officer held one up, its contents undeniable. "We have a hit, Sergeant. Looks like a substantial amount." Peter's blood ran cold. He stared at the drugs, then at Sandra's horrified face, then back at the officers whose expressions had turned from neutral to accusatory. He felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. This wasn't a mistake. This was a nightmare. And it was happening in the garden. Chapter 8. The Impossible Choice. "Mr. Davies, Ms. Thompson," Sergeant Miller said, his voice hard, holding up one of the drug packages. "Do you care to explain this?" Peter felt a crushing wave of unreality. We don't understand. I have no idea how that got there. We've never seen those before. We don't deal drugs." His voice was frantic, desperate to convey the truth. Sandra, tears streaming down her face, nodded vehemently. "He's telling the truth. We just moved here. We're getting married. We wouldn't do something like this." Sergeant Miller's eyes were cold, unyielding. "Mr. Davies, Ms. Thompson, we received a very specific tip from a source who knew exactly where to find these. This isn't a small amount for personal use. This looks like dealing. You're looking at serious charges here. You'll have to own up for this, or you'll both be going to jail." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Jail. For something they knew absolutely nothing about. Peter's mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation, but there was none. Someone had put them there. But who? And why? He looked at Sandra, her face pale and streaked with tears, her body trembling uncontrollably. She was innocent. He couldn't bear the thought of her being dragged through this, her dreams of a happy future shattered. He loved her more than anything. A terrible, unthinkable thought solidified in his mind. If one of them had to take the fall, it wouldn't be her. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, the bitter taste of resignation filling his mouth. "It was me," Peter said, his voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in his hands. "The drugs. They're mine. Sandra had nothing to do with it. She didn't know. Sandra's head snapped towards him, her eyes wide with shock and protest. Peter. No. What are you doing? He gave her a quick, pleading look, a silent message of sacrifice. Don't argue. Don't fight me on this. I'm doing this for you. Sergeant Miller raised an eyebrow, a hint of suspicion in his eyes, but also a sense of grim satisfaction. Is that so, Mr. Davies? Yes. Peter affirmed, forcing conviction into his voice. I was experimenting. Trying to make some quick money. It was stupid. Sandra didn't know. She's completely innocent. He could feel Sandra's eyes on him, a mixture of horror and dawning realization. He knew she understood his intention, even if she couldn't accept the cost. His heart ached, but his resolve held. If this was the only way to protect her, then so be it. The officers exchanged glances. It wasn't perfect, but a confession was a confession. They didn't need to delve deeper for now. Peter was handcuffed, his world shrinking rapidly around him. As he was led away, he cast one last look at Sandra, his eyes conveying all the love and sorrow he couldn't express aloud. He would give up everything for her freedom. Chapter 9. Shackles and Shadows. The trial was a blur of legal jargon, circumstantial evidence, and the cold, hard weight of Peter's forced confession. Despite Sandra's tearful pleas and her fervent declarations of his innocence, the deck was stacked against him. The anonymous tip, the discovery of the drugs exactly where the tipster indicated, and Peter's unwavering, though false, admission of guilt sealed his fate. The fact that he was new to the neighborhood, a blank slate to the legal system, only made him an easier target. On a bleak Monday morning, Peter Davies, an innocent man, was found guilty of drug possession with intent to supply. The judge, stern-faced, delivered the sentence, 5 years in a state prison. The gavel's sharp crack echoed in the courtroom, a death knell for Peter and Sandra's dreams. Sandra let out a strangled cry, rushing forward, only to be held back by a bailiff. Peter, his face devoid of emotion, was led away, the clink of his shackles a chilling soundtrack to Sandra's despair. He was no longer Peter, the hopeful fiancé, the diligent worker. He was now inmate 4732, a number in a system that had swallowed him whole. The first few weeks were a relentless torment for Sandra. The house, once a beacon of the shared future, now felt like a mausoleum. Every room echoed with Peter's absence. She visited him religiously, every chance she got, their conversations stilted and strained through the thick plexiglass. Peter urged her to move on, to forget him, to live her life. But Sandra refused. Her love for him was a fierce, burning coal in her chest, fueling a desperate need for justice. She replayed the day of the arrest, the strange tip, the precise location of the drugs. Who could have known? Who would have wanted to hurt them so badly? Her mind circled back to Sean and Raymond, their unsettling animosity, Sean's chilling threat, "You wait and see what I do next." It had been vague then, but now, a horrifying clarity began to emerge. They were the only ones who had expressed such open hostility. They were the ones involved in drugs. It was a leap, but it was the only one that made a shred of sense. Sandra started paying closer attention. She cancelled her wedding planning, put her career on hold, and dedicated herself to one single mission, getting Peter out. She spent hours by her front window, a silent sentinel, watching the house next door. She took notes, jotted down car descriptions, times of arrivals and departures. And then, one humid afternoon, her suspicions solidified into chilling certainty. Through her window, she saw Sean and Raymond in their front yard, engaged in a quick, furtive transaction with a nervous-looking man. A small, clear bag was exchanged for a wad of cash. It was quick, discreet, but undeniable. Her heart pounded. She needed proof. Her phone, clutched in her hand, suddenly felt like a weapon. She raised it, zooming in, pressing record. The grainy footage captured the exchange, a damning piece of the puzzle. Hope, fierce and exhilarating, ignited within her. Peter was innocent, and she was going to prove it. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. Sandra's resolve hardened with each passing day. She continued her vigil, her phone always ready. She captured more footage, shadowy figures exchanging packages, Raymond counting stacks of cash on his porch, Sean openly bagging what looked like marijuana on a picnic table. The videos were grainy, often shaky, but they were irrefutable. She had a mountain of evidence of Sean and Raymond's drug-dealing activities, a stark contrast to Peter's clean record. Then, one night, the noise began again. It was late, past midnight, and a soft scraping sound came from her front garden. Sandra, already on high alert, crept to her window, heart hammering against her ribs. Below, illuminated by the faint glow of the street lamp, were two figures. Sean and Raymond. They were digging again, in the same spot where the authorities had found the drugs before. Her breath hitched. They were trying to frame her again. Or perhaps, they were just using her garden as another temporary stash. This time, she wouldn't just watch. She pressed record on her phone, her hands surprisingly steady. The low-light video captured it all. Sean and Raymond carefully burying more waterproof packages in her garden. She filmed them whispering, grunting with effort, their faces clearly visible in the phone's night mode. As they finished and quietly retreated back to their own property, a cold, hard certainty settled in Sandra's stomach. This was it. This was the proof. It wasn't just suspicion anymore, it was solid, undeniable evidence. They were the ones who had put the drugs there the first time. They were the ones who had set Peter up. The motive, the means, the opportunity, it all clicked into place. The insidious plot, Raymond's cunning, Sean's desperate need for a hiding spot, the joint desire to get rid of them. It all made horrifying sense. She had hours of footage now, Sean and Raymond dealing drugs openly, and now, the indisputable video of them burying drugs in her garden, the very act that had condemned Peter. She realized the pattern. They likely used her garden as a safe, temporary stash, easily accessible but seemingly innocent. Then, when the heat was on, or when they wanted someone out of the way, they tipped off the police, sacrificing part of their stash to eliminate a nuisance. The next morning, Sandra didn't hesitate. She didn't even bother with a lawyer yet. She went straight to the police station, her bag heavy with her phone and a portable hard drive where she'd already backed up all the videos. She walked up to the counter, her voice calm and strong despite the whirlwind of emotion inside her. I need to speak to someone about an injustice. I have proof that the man you sent to prison is innocent. Chapter 11. Free at last. Sergeant Miller, initially skeptical, listened with a detached air as Sandra explained. His expression remained impassive as she described her suspicions about Sean and Raymond. Only when she began to present the videos did a flicker of concern, then genuine shock, cross his face. The first few clips showed Sean and Raymond openly dealing, shadowy figures meeting at all hours. Damning, but not directly linked to Peter's case. Then came the footage from last night, clear, undeniable shots of Sean and Raymond burying packages in Sandra's garden. The exact location. The same method. Sergeant Miller watched in stunned silence. He fast-forwarded, rewound, zoomed in. The faces were clear. The act was undeniable. This is a new video? He asked, his voice low. From last night, Sandra confirmed, her heart pounding with a desperate hope. They came back. They've been using my garden as a drop-off, or a hiding spot. They framed Peter, sir. They planted those drugs and then Raymond called you, telling you exactly where to find them. Peter covered for me, but he's innocent. He's been in jail for 5 months because of them. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place for the authorities. The highly specific anonymous tip, the suddenness of the discovery, Peter's strange, almost too eager confession. It all made sense now. They had a mountain of evidence against Sean and Raymond, not just for Peter's framing, but for their extensive drug-dealing operations. Within hours, a new warrant was issued. Sean and Raymond's house was raided. More drugs were found, along with dealing paraphernalia and records that linked them directly to the anonymous tip that had sent Peter to prison. The next day, Peter Davies, bewildered but cautiously hopeful, was escorted out of his prison cell. The news of Sandra's findings and the subsequent arrests had reached him like a fragmented dream. He walked into the sunlight, squinting, and saw her. Sandra, standing there, her face tear-streaked but radiant. He ran to her, and she into his arms. They held each other for a long moment, the weight of the shared ordeal, the pain, the separation, melting away in that embrace. You did this, Peter whispered, his voice thick with emotion. You freed me. Sandra pulled back, a fierce love shining in her eyes. I never stopped fighting. I knew you were innocent. I knew I had to wait until I got you free. Sean and Raymond, now facing a litany of charges including drug trafficking, conspiracy, and perverting the course of justice, were arrested and taken into custody. The neighborhood, finally rid of its dark underbelly, breathed a collective sigh of relief. A few months later, the sun shone again, this time on a different kind of ceremony. Peter and Sandra stood before their loved ones, in the very garden that had once been the site of the deepest despair, now meticulously restored. The bitter memory of the past was replaced by the sweet promise of the future. Peter, finally free, his hand clasped firmly in Sandra's, looked into her eyes. You waited, he whispered, a tear escaping. You waited for me. Sandra smiled, her eyes shining. Always. They exchanged vows, promises whispered under a sky that seemed brighter than ever. The journey had been long, fraught with injustice and heartache, but their love had endured, stronger than any prison bars, more resilient than any frame. They were finally married, having escaped the suffocating shadow of their past, ready to truly begin their lives together, free at last. The end. Story by Kayode Ike.